And we're going to now transition to the next panel, Righting the Wrongs of the Drug War. And Mickey Norris is going to be moderating this panel. I do want to say, stay tuned following.
It was pointed out by Michael at one of our first events.
Following this panel, yeah, everybody mute, please. We'll have the cultivation and genetics exchange about the art and craft of growing. And following that at 5:45 Pacific time, we'll have a beautiful panel on health, wellness, and beauty and the many applications of the cannabis plant for healing and for health all around. And finally, we'll be finishing up the day with a plant consciousness panel looking at the broader range of nature's agents for our personal and spiritual growth. So right now, I'm delighted to introduce Mickey Norris, who has been active for many years in working for the rights of the prisoners of the drug war, and she'll introduce our distinguished circle here today.
Hi, well, hi everybody. Thank you for inviting me to moderate this great panel. I must say, to segue off of the last segment, that cannabis, the spirit of cannabis, I think has compelled me to become the activist that I am today, to work for social justice and the environment. It really has this spirit that makes people tune into that. So I first learned about all the wrongs of the drug war, I should say, in 1995, when we first, when Chris Conrad and I and our late partner, Virginia Resner, got together and decided to create a photo exhibit about the prisoners of the drug war and to make that injustice visible. I had quite the awakening, quite the education at that point about how the drug war is operating through the stories of these people caught up in it, how it has shattered so many individuals' lives, so many families, so many communities. And it was just really out of control and also subverting our Constitution at the same point. One thing we learned was the importance of the personal story and showing the faces and making this injustice visible. We found that telling statistics was one thing, and that's important. But the fact that that we had so many people in prison seemed to go in one ear and out the other until you really see who is impacted by this whole thing. But where we are today, the drug war is, I should say, a very timely topic for what's going on today with the outrage against racial and social injustice, that the drug war is pretty much a driver of a lot of the racial and social injustice today. It has basically made the US the #1 incarcerator in the world. And like COVID-19, similar statistics, it's interesting that we have 5% of the world's population exhibiting 25% of the infections of COVID-19. We also have 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prison population. And that tells us that something is really wrong with the way our country has dealt with with our drug policies. Basically, currently we have about 40,000 people sitting in prisons on marijuana offenses. There's 2.3 million people incarcerated in our country today. 456,000 of them are drug offenders, and most of them are nonviolent drug offenders. And so I'd like to dedicate this segment actually to the fathers who are sitting in prison today on Father's Day, and these people whose families have been disrupted, their children have been orphaned by the drug war with having their parents subjected to these outrageous mandatory minimums, conspiracy laws, things that came in back in starting in the 80s with President Reagan, then who installed these mandatory minimums, these conspiracy laws, the asset forfeiture laws. It was amped up during Clinton, who also Clinton put a lot more money into the police and into the prisons, and now, you know, the police forces all have paramilitary equipment, things like that. So I'd say it's time to probably defund the drug war, because we are wasting billions of dollars on a failed policy that is not working, but is really creating a lot of havoc and a lot of social injustice, destroying too many lives. It's also become deadly. We've seen that recently, most glaringly, in the example of Breonna Taylor, who was killed during a no-knock search warrant. And that is something that happens a lot, where people are surprised when the police come in, they knock it down with these battering rams coming to these people's home. They don't know what's going on. And since we have an armed society, people often start shooting back, and then they get killed, like Breonna Taylor. She wasn't shooting, but she was a victim of this. Also, Donald Scott, back in the 90s, was a Malibu millionaire. The government wanted his property, and they said, they used marijuana as an excuse, that they saw plants on his property. So they came in an early morning raid, and they ended up killing him as a result too. There's lots of examples of that. So there are just so many things to talk about. I want to get right into our panelists, but I just want to say one more thing. I just recently watched the film 13th, the documentary. I highly recommend it to all the people watching. It talks about the 13th Amendment that ended slavery in this country, but it left a major loophole for slave labor in terms of like people in prison. And if you're criminalized, they can make you work for them for free and lose all your rights and this and that. It's disenfranchising so many people. And so let me get started. We did this book, Shattered Lives, Portraits from America's Drug War. And if you'll notice, Amy Pova, who is on our panel today, was featured in this because her story was such an egregious injustice. But Amy served she was sentenced to a 24-year sentence on conspiracy charges, and she served 9 years in prison. So she has definitely personal experience with what's going on. And until she got clemency from President Clinton in 2000. So Amy came out. When she got out, she knew she had to make it her mission to help the people left behind in prison. And she formed the Can Do Foundation, which she is the president of now. And their focus at this point, aside from helping people with clemency petitions, she's helping people with compassionate releases during this time when the prisoners are held captive in these institutions that are also can become a death sentence because there's no chance for social distancing, all that, but they are in these prisons that they're much more vulnerable to infection and even death as a result of these infections. So these non-violent, low-level offenders, some of them are getting death sentences now. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Amy Pova. She also is a filmmaker. She did 420, the documentary. And but she has been such a tremendous asset and voice for the people left in prisons today. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate Earthdance sponsoring this wonderful platform so that we can all come together and weigh in, especially on the wrongs of the drug war. I stand on the shoulders of people like you, Mickey, Chris Conrad, and Virginia Resner, who, as I was going to point out, put me on the book of Shattered Lives. And I'm a testament to the fact that advocacy works. I am certain that I would not have received clemency if it had not been for the Herculean effort of so many people putting my story out there, because David France, who is an Oscar-nominated documentarian, saw my story and wanted an exclusive to write about it for Glamour magazine. After Glamour magazine wrote up my story, which included Kimba Smith, Serena Nunn, and several other women, additionally to my own personal case, we got over 16 politicians to support my clemency by writing to the pardon attorney at that time, Roger Adams. But even still, it took 2 senators from Arkansas to take my case directly to President Clinton, because the office of the pardon attorney is buried inside the Department of Justice. So it lives inside Department of Justice. They have to turn over all of their recommendations to DOJ. And we now know that the Department of Justice listens heavily to the opinion of their prosecutors. So it's a conflict of interest. And I personally know that in my own case, the Clinton administration asked for my petition and the pardon office would not send it over. We have somebody who is on our advisory board, Sam Morrison, who explained to me that he became the whistleblower who worked there for 13 years, and that the pardon, one of the caseworkers did not like my story because it made DOJ look bad. Well, my suggestion is, if the Department of Justice doesn't want to look bad, maybe they should prosecute cases differently. In my case, the kingpin was free. They gave him a plea bargain sweetheart deal, and he got 3 years probation for snitching everybody out. And they didn't like that story out there. Well, that's the way it works. They often say that we need mandatory minimums, and we need these tools to force the low-hanging fruit, the small people, to help us get the bad guys. That's not true. They often give a deal to the so-called bad guy, which can be a kingpin or whoever, if they're willing to cooperate. And those are usually the people who have the most information. There's a term, first in, first out. The first one to sing gets the best deal. And that's my personal experience. So I want to thank you for being an absolute iconic figure in this movement, as you and Chris have been for many years. And I also want to say that after I got out and started the Can Do Foundation, it wasn't until Obama started Clemency Project 2014 that our organization kind of got thrown into the spotlight, if you will, because we were the only organization that was focusing on clemency that was a nonprofit. And during that time, we helped 44 women who received clemency. Only 105 women out of 1,715 people received clemency from President Obama. But we did a full court press at the end of his term, where we got a letter published in Business Insider calling for them to revisit some of the denials. Alice Marie Johnson was one of them that we were upset about, but we saw so many good people being denied because DOJ listens to their prosecutors. We also helped over 30 men who received clemency during the Obama era. But then when Trump came in, we didn't give up. We were devoted to continuing with the clemency process. As everybody knows, Alice Marie Johnson has become a big figure with that, thanks to Kim Kardashian, who saw a video. And we had 3 recently receive clemency. Crystal Munoz was one of the pot offenders that we've advocated for. We have some good news in that Craig Cecil, that a lot of people have helped and advocated for, who was a pot lifer, came home on home confinement. So right now there's 3 avenues for people to get home: clemency, compassionate release, and home confinement. The BOP is dragging their feet on the home confinement ones, but we've had several people on the website receive home confinement that we're including Craig Cecil. And we've been successful in 4 compassionate releases recently. Richard Lynn, Daryl Hope, Alyssa Castillo, they were all lifers. And a lot of people said that lifers probably wouldn't get a compassionate release. That's not our experience. We're currently helping Michael Peltier, who's a lifer. He's a paraplegic, and the judge appointed counsel in that case, which is rare. They don't normally appoint counsel. We hope that's a good sign. But we just need to encourage everybody to find their lane, lift all of it, all ships rise with the tide. We have a change.org petition to free all the pot prisoners. We also have a website. We have a guardian angel program. And I just want to say thank you so much, because advocacy does work. And I'm proud to be on this panel with other wonderful advocates as well, many of whom that I've worked with and communicated with. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. Everybody can go to candoclemency.com to find out more about her work. Next up, I'd like to introduce another former POW, Stephanie Landa, who served 5-year mandatory minimum for medical marijuana. She didn't have that medical marijuana defense in court because it was at the federal level. But anyway, she has Stephanie has a wonderful project called Freedom Grow, where she's been supporting the prisoners in prison by giving them financial assistance, by helping them making their time more comfortable in prison. So Stephanie, why don't you tell us what you're up to and what you think are some of the rights that need to be, the wrongs that needed to be righted.
Thank you very much, Mickey. Well, I went to prison after getting permission from San Francisco to grow medical marijuana. And then they came and raided us and turned us over to the feds. And of course, Chris was our expert witness. And, you know, he did the best he could do. He didn't realize that this was just fixed and we were going to jail for 5 years. So we went to jail. And when I was in prison, I realized, oh my God, you need money when you're in here. You cannot be in prison without money. And if you are, you're doing very hard time. So I started my Freedom Grow and I beg people for money and they donate it. And then I give it to the prisoners. Today I went to the mailbox and put in $50 for each pot prisoner that we take care of. And fortunately, Amy is getting them out. I mean, here's a picture of Craig. And it says free on his poster because he's free right now. And so Amy is just, we're giving them money while they're there and praying that Amy is getting them out. So, geez, I don't even know what to say. It's just so horrible that it's Father's Day and all these fathers.
Are you hearing anything from the prisoners about the conditions right now? Or are they under special restrictions?
They're under terrible restrictions. They're locked down most of the time. They get out for maybe an hour every day, and then they have to take a shower, make a phone call, maybe make a phone call. The lines are really long, and the emails aren't coming as often. And there are people dying in prison of the, of the virus because they're all locked in together. When I was in prison, I just couldn't even believe I was there. I was just like, I'm Jewish and I love pot. What am I doing here? Like there was no one else there like me. And it was difficult. It was very difficult because pot prisoners, every single one of them are saying, what is going on? Why am I locked up? So it's always been that way, even before it was totally legal. It was, when I was in prison, I thought I got permission to do this. And so I just didn't understand. And it's torture. After the first time you're strip searched, that's it. Your whole life has changed. This is not something that just happens. And everyone that's in for pot, not everyone, but most everyone would never, ever do any other crime. They're in because they love pot. And this is a way of life for them. It isn't just, oh, well, I like pot. For me personally, I started smoking when I was 13. And I was in and out of the hospital for stomach problems. And then when I started smoking pot, it just took away my stomach problems. I wasn't nauseous all the time. I wasn't wanting to throw up from the food because my digestion was working in 1 hour instead of 7 hours, and the marijuana slowed it down. So here I am, 74, and I don't have those stomach problems anymore. So it's a dicey thing. I'm telling you, it's not anything that anybody can, it's just not anything that you can understand. When you're in prison, the feeling of being in prison for pot, you can't understand why you're being tortured.
Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie, you also have a pen pal program that you connect prisoners to have some kind of connection with the outside, give them even more support. So we honor the work that you're doing with Freedom Grow, freedomgrow.org. Check it out. And
Thank you, Nikki.
Next up, I'd like to bring up Steve Deangelo, who I think I met through Ecolution, one of the first hemp businesses during the hemp revival back in the very early 90s. And Steve has become a preeminent leader in the cannabis industry. He's a lifelong activist, author, Cannabis Manifesto, educator, investor, entrepreneur. He's been out there for decades. His most notable achievements include Harborside Health Center, wonderful model kind of dispensaries, and there's 6 of them now. And it's publicly traded on the Canadian Securities Exchange. And Steve Hill Laboratory, the First Analytics Company, the ArcView Group. And he's just a very dedicated activist, and he now has the Last Prisoner project that he founded in 2019, and he's also launched his podcast, Radio Free Cannabis. So Steve, tell us more about the Last Prisoner project. It sounds fascinating, and how we can help prisoners get out.
Thanks so much, Mickey. And I'd like to recognize at the outset the work that you have done, the work that Amy has done, the work that Virginia did, the work that Chris did, the work that has gone on for a long time. I was so inspired by Shattered Lives, and I'll tell you the story of how I decided to launch the Last Prisoner project. But as I tell that story, I'd like you to keep in mind that no doubt there already planted in my consciousness was a seed that had been planted by you and Chris and Virginia back in the 90s, because what you did with Shattered Lives was put a face on the statistics. I decided to launch the Last Prisoner project in 2017. This was after the voters of California had passed Prop 64, and we knew that we were headed towards a for-profit cannabis industry in California. And I, like many of the legacy cannabis operators in California at that time, was going up to Toronto, the capital of cannabis capital, seeking capital, trying to figure out how we were going to transition our businesses into this for-profit market. And I found myself at the top of a very impressive skyscraper in the financial district in Toronto, sitting at a very long conference table with some of the most important people in the Canadian capital markets. And spread in front of us were spreadsheets, were business plans that envisioned cannabis on a vast scale, hundreds of millions of dollars, tons and tons of cannabis. And it had been a pretty good day. Everybody was feeling pretty good at that table when my phone started buzzing. And I looked down, I saw it was my buddy Chuck, who was serving 4 years in a Pennsylvania correctional facility for smuggling, conspiracy to smuggle 14 pounds of weed from California to Pennsylvania. And I stepped out to take the call, and like every call that you have with a friend in prison, it's a grim call. It's hard to talk to your friends when they're there in that situation, and it affects you. So when I walked into the conference room after the call ended, I was really feeling that connection with Chuck. And I looked around the table and I was just struck by the disparity between what was going on with my friend Chuck and what was going on at that table, where absolutely nobody had any fear whatsoever about being arrested, about going to prison ever. And the amounts of cannabis we were talking about were magnitudes greater. And so I knew in that moment I had to do something, that I could not be one of the people that was building a business legally on the outside, and know that my friend and tens of thousands of other people, we didn't know how many then, of course, disproportionately Black and brown people, were going to be sitting in prison. One of the experiences that I had during Prop 64 was to see the horse trading that happens around initiatives and legalization. And unfortunately, in none of the legalization measures that have been passed, voter initiatives or legislative, has there been any provisions for the release of our cannabis prisoners. And so that's why we launched the Last Prisoner Project. Mary can tell you a little bit more about what we do. Because I have this unique history of both having been a cannabis prisoner, I am a convicted cannabis felon. I've seen that side of the bars, and also playing a leading role in the development of the legal industry. I felt that I had both the moral obligation and a remarkable opportunity to do good here, because if we can just carve off 1 or 2 or 3% of the money that this legal industry makes globally, not only can we bring home every single one of our 40,000 cannabis prisoners in the United States, I believe that we can bring home every single cannabis prisoner on the planet.
Thank you, especially now that we do have some legalization, a lot of legal medical marijuana, and there's still people sitting in prison for doing those things. So thank you, Steve, for taking this on. Yeah, and let's get to Mary and get more information about what the Last Prisoner Project is up to. Mary is a Maui-based activist. Aloha, Mary. And she's the managing director of the Last Prisoner Project. And in addition to her activism work, she produces the Maui Yoga Festival and Maui Cannabis Conference. So tell us more about the Last Prisoner Project.
Yeah, hi everybody. It is truly my honor to be working as the managing director of Last Prisoner Project. I've been in the cannabis industry for half my life. It's been 19 years now, and I've seen everything change. And the fact that, it's practically legal across the nation now, but there's over 40,000 people still behind bars is devastating. So as we do our work, and as I'm reaching out to kind of cannabis industry leaders, I share with them that I feel that it's we should all have a moral obligation to help the people who are still incarcerated. And so, thank you, Miki, thank you, Stephanie, thank you, Amy, for all of your work, all of these years doing this work. It's so monumental what you guys have already done. And I feel that this current movement with the Black Lives Matter movement is really putting all of this in the forefront. And I feel that it's all setting the stage where real change can happen, and it's going to happen really soon. So Last Prisoner Project, we feel that we, as a nonprofit organization in the cannabis industry, that we have the prisoners on our minds all the time. As there's other organizations helping with policy, such as MPP and SSDP, and they have helped, create more legalization with cannabis. But we feel that as Last Prisoner Project, that we should all have a seat at the table, advocating for the prisoners as laws are now kind of being updated as we move forward. One of the ways that we are working to release prisoners is actually a little different than what's happened in the past, is we're actually coming at it from the state level as well. So that looks as we are working with governor's offices in order to creating basically a new category of clemency specifically for nonviolent cannabis offenders to help people who are serving state level sentences, because there are people serving life sentences at the state level. For example, there's Fate Winslow. Fate Winslow is serving a life sentence for 2 dime bags. He literally made $5 off the sale. And it's just, these stories need to be shared over and over, time and time again. I share their stories with these CEOs of these massive cannabis companies, and a lot of them have never heard these stories before. And so they need to be heard. They need to be shared. I always remind everybody that we feel that these amazing, brilliant minds who are locked away for the time being, that they're victims of unjust laws, and that they really need to be looked at as such. Yeah, thank you for letting me share.
So are you actually reaching out to these CEOs to donate to your project? Is there some kind of project where it actually they get some kind of certificate or something where they shows that they are giving back to helping the prisoners get out?
Yeah, definitely. We have a couple different programs. So one of it's called Partners for Freedom. There's different incentives for different levels of donation, but one of them is if they pay a monthly donation to help us do the work that we're doing and create the programs that so we do have a clemency initiative, actually getting people released. And then our other program is helping them to rebuild their lives, which is our reentry program. And that program is basically creating pathways to employment in order to hopefully lower those recidivism rates. But for cannabis companies who want to come on board to support, we've got Partners for Freedom. There's an incentive. It's a monthly donation with a year-long pledge, and they can actually put our Last Prisoner Project logo onto their brand packaging, which signals to consumers that their brand gives back and that they're a socially responsible company. So that's been popular. We also have another program called Roll It Up for Justice. That is for retail partners. And so basically allowing customers and consumers to donate at checkout. And that can be for e-commerce sites. That can also be for brick and mortar stores, dispensaries, head shops. So there's a couple options, ways for people to get involved. And then above and beyond that, volunteers, of course. And I love that Stephanie's been doing the Pen Pal program. I feel that it's so important for the prisoners to have correspondence. They're lonely. They've lost touch with their families. Getting a letter can be that push that they need to keep going for however much longer they need. So it is really important to make sure that they are not forgotten, that their stories are shared, and that we continue to work towards their freedom.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. So we only have about 9 minutes left. So why don't we go around and say what you think? What is one thing what wrong you would like to make right, and how can we do it? Should we start with Amy?
Sorry, have to unmute. It takes a while to unmute. Well, I would like to first say that, media exposure, as I mentioned in my situation with the Glamour magazine article, we try to get media exposure for the people on our website. And so for anybody listening, if you know a journalist, we continue to make those connections and have done so quite often. But it's so important to support. When people come home, they have to support the organizations that supported them while they were in. And sometimes I think that, I know people get excited, but even a shout out on social media, Stephanie has put money on the books of people for years. And I don't think she gets enough credit for that. I just got to give her a boost there, because it's important for people to remind those who may not know who supported them while they were in and what it meant to them, whether it's in a testimonial or whatever. So, I really just want to say what I think is important. We have a guardian angel program that also pairs people. There's email. So if people don't want to write a letter, we can sign you up on cord links and you can communicate with prisoners. But I really want to see the end of the drug war. All this incremental criminal justice reform always gets watered down. We get played. It's horrible. And if you study the drug war, you'll know it started with racism during the Nixon era. It's a racist policy that has continued. And this is the time right now to say we're done with the prosecutorial misconduct, the ghost dope, the conspiracy law, the plea bargains, the trial penalty phase. All of it is horrible. And most of the politicians in DC have acknowledged it. But guess what? They're too chicken to put something on the books to say, to, like you said, defund. I even like that better than saying end the drug war. That seems to fall on deaf ears. So how about defund it? I like that a lot. And that's what should be done.
Thank you, Amy. Who'd like to go next? Stephanie?
Sure. Hi. I think that everyone should at least give $1 to freedomgrow.org because we need more money. And when you're in prison, you need money. You have to call your kids. There's no money. And if you're in for life, like a lot of people are, you've run out of money 20 years ago. So it's really important for you to give me money and let me put it on their books, or put it on their books yourself. You could just go to freedomgrow.org and get their names. So it's important to have money when you're in prison.
Definitely, especially because the prison system totally rips off the prisoners with the super expensive phone calls, that the surcharges they throw on that. That's a wrong that needs to be righted as well, is to end those surcharges and make it so expensive that people can't even keep their connections going with their families and loved ones and friends and stuff. So right. Steve, what do you think?
I think there's so many wrongs in the world. It's a very difficult question, but what we're focusing on at Last Prisoner Project right now is gaining the release of Michael Thompson, who's currently incarcerated in his 25th year of a 40 to 60 year cannabis sentence for 3 pounds of cannabis. And Michael has 2 petitions that are sitting on Governor Whitmer's desk, a clemency petition and a compassionate release petition. The prosecutor's office that originally prosecuted Michael in the 1990s, the Flint prosecutor's office, has endorsed his release, and Governor Whitmer is sitting on it. The only reason that Michael is not free now is because Governor Whitmer won't sign his petition. Michael's 68 years old. He has underlying conditions that make him more susceptible to COVID, and he is in a prison in which COVID is present and rampant. So we are asking everybody who has a little bit of extra time to get in touch with Governor Whitmer's office, to get in touch with the parole board in Michigan, and let them know that we are not asking anymore. We are demanding the immediate release of Michael Thompson before his already outrageous sentence turns into a death sentence.
Thank you. Yes, I hope everybody does that. Mary?
Yeah, I'd like to say, and I feel that it's really important for people who are business owners to be sure to hire people who have passed, hire people who have felonies on their records. People need jobs. That is a really, really important. When I'm having talks with people in the cannabis industry who say that they want to make a difference, that's one of the first things I ask them to do is please be aware and hire people who have passed. Something that we're really working on in the future is we want to work, as we're working with more and more governors' offices, updating the laws so people who have passed with cannabis, so they can work with plant touching cannabis companies that want to hire them, because that is something, there's a barrier to entry. If you have a past record with cannabis, now they won't let you work even in the legal cannabis industry, which is a travesty, because those are the people who are pioneers of the industry. they're actually full-on experts. And the fact that they're blocked from entering that now the legal cannabis industry is another travesty on top of things. So that is one of the wrongs that we can right is by letting people work within the industry. They are the experts.
Thank you. All great ideas. I would say that since we're reimagining the police, we can have a time to reimagine our drug policies and switch it from a criminal issue to a public health issue and put the money towards, if people are having problems with drugs, get them the help they need. Because one thing we've learned is that prison is not helping people. It's not helping our country. It's subverting our constitutional protections, our human rights, in this country and around the world as well. So I'd like to see that, really, we had the First Step Act. It's time for a Second Step Act or a final Step Act of getting us out of this drug war mindset and all the billions of dollars. We don't have a lot of money right now. This country is, we shouldn't be spending it in this way, just ruining people's lives. So there's a much better way of dealing with this. So I'd like to thank you all so much for your participation. Thank you so much for all the wonderful work that you are doing and continue to do. I wish you the best of luck. And I think it's time for me to turn over the panel to Nikki, is it?
That's right. We're
taking it on.
Thank you so much, Mickey. That was tremendous. Steve, Amy, Stephanie, Mary, beautiful, beautiful, full story. Hopefully it will inspire a lot of action. So I want to remind everyone before we go into the next panel on cultivation and genetics, that this event is a gift economy event. We don't have sponsorship. We don't have ticket sales. All of the artists, all of the speakers, and even us, the producers, have basically gifted this. And this is the way a number of these events are going these days, because we rely on those of you who are enjoying and benefiting from the event to gift back to the speakers, to the artists, to the producers, and to these many causes, such as those mentioned on the panel here today, and the others today. So please take a look on the earthdance.tv website.